Welcome, Dr. Salzman. Thanks so much for joining us for this Eden podcast, Building Ourselves Through the Parsha.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me, Karen.
So for this week, I talk about the fact that when Noach leaves the Teva, he comes out and he plants a vineyard and he gets drunk. Using this as a springboard, I want to ask you in general about the nature of addiction and specifically about one of the challenges of our times, addiction to technology and social media. First, would you please briefly define addiction for us? And I want to ask you, would you put addiction to technology in the same category as other addictions, for instance, to alcohol or drugs?
Okay. Well, I think those are both really good questions. So first of all, how do you define an addiction? Well, an addiction is basically a chronic, progressive brain disease that tends to get worse over time if it's untreated. And as we all know, people get addicted to alcohol and drugs, but also to other things besides substances. People can get addicted to exercising. People can get addicted to working. People can get addicted to gambling. And people can also get addicted to sexual acting out, sexual behaviors. As far as your other question, if addiction to technology, the second question was, is addiction to technology as bad as other ones?
Same category as those other ones?
Well, it's definitely in the same category because one of the hallmarks of addiction is a behavior that you want to stop and you can't, or a behavior that is causing problems in your life and yet you still continue to do it. And if you look at technology and smartphones, let's say, there's no question that smartphone use is absolutely causing a lot of damage, both for individuals and also for our relationships and also for our society as a whole. It's making it hard for us to focus. It's making it hard for us to get our work done. It's distracting us and creating barriers between ourselves and our spouses and our children and our friends. We're much more disconnected. And as a society, I think, we're much more disconnected and cut off. So I think that people realize it, but it's still, people can't stop. People can't stop using their smartphone. I think, people would sooner give up a lot of things before they give up their smartphone.
Yes, definitely. I can say that just one time I had to give my phone in to get fixed for a few hours, and just that feeling of where's my phone was very important.
Absolutely. It's kind of like leaving the house without your pants. It's you feel like half a person.
So my next question, is a good lead into this, is perhaps you've seen or heard about the recent Netflix movie, The Social Dilemma, which highlights the dangers of social media for teens who can really spiral downward quickly into depression and social isolation. How worried are you about this for our children, our teens, and our younger children?
Yeah.
And do you know what the statistics are about teen addiction to social media, and in particular for religious Jews, where do we stand in this picture?
Yeah. Okay. So, I absolutely think that social media use is of huge concern for everybody, and for teenagers probably the most, right? Because teenagers and children, their brains are still developing. So there has been a lot of research that shows the earlier a person gets exposed to an addictive substance, the more serious the addiction will be. So in other words, if someone starts smoking at a younger age, they're much more likely to have a much more serious addiction than someone who starts smoking later. And the same thing with social media. So just to jump to the question of, should we be limiting the social media that our kids and our teenagers have? Absolutely. And the smartphone use, absolutely. We can talk a little bit more about that. Let's see. You also asked, what was the other question you asked in there?
Statistics for teen addiction to social media. Is there?
I don't have the statistics, but I'll tell you, I treat, in my practice, I specialize in internet addiction and sexual addiction and smartphone addiction, social media addiction. And generally speaking, I work with mostly adults, but I do sometimes work with teens as well. And when I see the teenagers, they are in much worse shape, when it comes to their smartphone and their technology use than adults. Just again, because, if you give a device to one of your kids, they can figure it out much quicker than you and I can. And again, the younger it is that you get into something, the more deeply you get into it. And I see that it definitely, it affects their ability to socialize with each other. I think all these apps all these dating apps where you swipe left and swipe right, I think people don't have courtship skills anymore, or to a much lesser extent. People, because you don't need them. You don't need to actually be able to chat with someone. You don't need to be able to have a conversation. All you need to do is swipe left or swipe right. It's causing tremendous damage, I think, to younger people.
Wow. And so then what do you believe a healthy use of social media looks like? I mean, in my Vartar, I talk about two extremes, complete rejection. So here, let's use the example of technology, complete rejection of technology versus overuse, and we'll call it addiction. What does that look like? What does the addiction look like in terms of hours per day? And where is the healthy middle ground? I'd love to hear some practical
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it depends on the person. Some people will find themselves getting completely sucked in, and this is true with other addictions as well, right? Some people, they can drink alcohol occasionally and but that's it. They can leave it alone, right? Other people, if they're drinking, they are drinking all the time, right? Every day before they go to sleep, they need, at least a few glasses of wine just to help them make it through the day, right? And this is similar with this. Some people just have a proclivity to it. I think that most of us do. And I think in that movie, The Social Dilemma you mentioned, I know that I think was it last year or 2 years already, where a few people from Facebook, a few of the people who started Facebook, I think maybe it was it Sean Parker? I'm not sure, but one of the original people of Facebook came out, or actually more than one. There was kind of actually a little bit of a little thing where a bunch of people were doing it. I seem to remember that kind of people were coming out and sort of confessing that, yes, we actually purposely designed this to be addictive, very similar to the way that it came out that, tobacco companies were actually specifically designing cigarettes to be addictive, right? Which they had denied for many years. And then finally they had to admit that they actually engineered them so that people would get addicted. This it's very much the same thing with social media, and I've read things that these big social media titans, the people who started all these companies and run these companies, won't even let their own kids use them. They won't even or they're severely limit the amount of time that they are allowed to go online. As far as finding a balance, I think that's a tough one. It's a tough one because if someone is addicted, there is really no healthy amount that you can do, right? I'm saying there's no such thing. I mean, if you take, let's say, crack cocaine, which is considered to be, the most addictive of any drug, right? There is no such thing, sort of a healthy recreational use of crack, right? You never heard of someone who smokes crack, on the weekends, or right? If you're smoking crack, your life is. I mean, you probably don't know anyone who smokes crack, but I hope not. But it takes over your whole life, right? It may seem extreme to compare that to social media, but I think it's very similar. I mean, I know for years already we've heard stories about young people, and I'm sure it's older people too, who basically can't make it through Shabbos without checking their phones, right? And so they actually are Mechala Shabbos because they need to, check their feed, right? I actually recently, I resisted some of these new social media. TikTok, I figured it's not for me. It's just teenagers. I actually just a couple days ago installed it on my phone, and I totally see why it's completely addictive. So
Yes.
as far as if there's a healthy balance, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Again, like if you take something like heroin, there is no such thing as an occasional heroin user. So I think that people have to really think very hard about what they're giving up, by using social media, how it is interfering in their relationship. And as with every other addiction, the person who's addicted doesn't really see the damage that it's causing in their lives, right? Or they're really good at rationalizing, right? The person who gets arrested for running someone over, driving while drunk, will swear off alcohol and say, I will never drink again. And very often, within months, certainly, or very often within years, they're drinking again, right? And it's like how because when you're the one who's addicted, you always have reasons why. Oh, it's okay, just this time, it's okay, it's not a big deal. I'm not really addicted. I can stop whenever I want. So it's important to have a discussion with people in your family, with your spouses, with your kids, and talk to them. Hey, look, I think you're using this too much, or you should know that it seems that you're spending all your time on your phone and you're not hanging out with your friends. Or you should know that, the kids want to talk to you, but they can't because you're on your phone all the time. So I think it's a very difficult thing, and people have to be very honest with themselves. And sometimes it takes something extreme for people to sort of wake up and be like, oh my gosh, I need to get off this completely.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that on the one hand, it's highly addictive. I mean, it's interesting. I compared it more to alcohol, which was the example where you can enjoy in moderation, but you seem to be taking it to. You're saying it has the potential to be addictive.
Well, right.
Like,
In the classic text of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is called the Big Book of AA, they talk about alcoholics as having like a certain allergy to alcohol, whereas people who get addicted to alcohol, there's something different about them, almost like they have a different constitution that makes it impossible for them to drink like normal people, right? That regular people can take it or leave it, but if you're an alcoholic, you really can't. And once you have had it once, you basically open this Pandora's box, and you are always at risk of, if you get into alcoholism, your life will be ruined. So it's similar here. I think that in that, we're all wired to want connection with other people, right? And again, it's been specifically engineered in a way to really pull us in and suck us in and keep us there, right? If you look at the feed on any social media, it's bottomless, right? You never reach the end of the information, right? And that's on purpose, because
yes,
each time you can just keep going and keep going, keep going, and that's a tough path to be on, because there's no end.
yes. So to end on a positive note, what would you say is a positive tip? What would you give an age? I mean, I know some of my kids, we were the last in elementary school to buy to
Smartphone?
phones for my kids, and then we have many restrictions, how much data they have out of the house and things like that. But we were completely in the minority. Uh,
Yes.
and so at a certain point, if you're not on WhatsApp as a kid, that also affects your social life. And so maybe I'd love to hear if they're a particular age, and then also if they're particular screen time. We have screen time on the phones now. What's a particular
Yes.
amount of time a day which is reasonable to be on?
Yeah. So, I think I wish that there was sort of a magic number, but I don't think there is, either for the age or the screen time. Again, I would say, do your best to keep them away from it as long as possible.
Yeah.
I can imagine that, if every kid in the elementary school has WhatsApp and your kid doesn't, that's probably, pretty embarrassing and pretty shameful for those
Yeah.
kids. It's tough when there are trends that everyone is doing, right? And there's a sort of peer pressure to do things that are actually destructive and damaging, right? And especially when everyone's doing it,
Yes.
it's very hard for people to say, hey, what's wrong with that? As you know, I treat sexual addiction. And so when I talk to some of my clients about masturbation, right, or looking at pornography, and they could be Orthodox, Jewish, not Jewish, whatever, they could say, well, yeah, but everyone looks at pornography, right? What is the big deal, right? One of the largest porn sites in the world advertises during the Super Bowl, right? I'm saying it's considered like, acceptable, normal, right? It's not considered shameful like it was maybe even 10, 15 years ago, for sure, before that. But so I would say do your best. Do your best. As far as terms of hours, definitely use apps, that help you to limit the screen time.
Yes.
Your kids are going to want to be on it all the time. And you have to set limits. And again, I think that it's okay for parents to be strict about this. In other words, they do need to have some time, because they need to be able to interact with their peers if all their peers are on there. But they don't need to be on there all day. They really don't. And it's interesting because I was always a little bit smug about this, because I did not let my kids, really online almost at all. And then, of course, with the pandemic, and now everyone's at home all the time, and now school is being conducted online,
Yeah.
and right, and and it's the only way to connect with friends, right,
Yeah.
to a large extent. So I've had to, let that into my kids' life, and I've seen myself, after being very preachy about it and be very smug that you don't need to let your kids on devices at all. I see that the reality is, for most of us right now, our kids do need to be on it to some extent. It doesn't mean they need to be on everything, right? They don't necessarily need to be on TikTok, even if all their
Right.
friends are, right? WhatsApp is one thing, right? But TikTok is something else, or Instagram. There, and it's up to you to have that conversation together with your partner, with your husband, and to decide what makes sense for our kids, and it could be different for each kid. But to have the discussion, to be intentional about it, because after all, that is, we're not just here to be friends to our kids, we're here to be their parents, and sometimes being their parent means not giving into everything they want, as as we all know.
Yes, yes. Well, this was incredibly informative, and it sounds like we even have so much more to talk about on other topics that you mentioned, just touched on here. And so I look forward to talking again soon. And thank you so, so much.
Sure, my pleasure, absolutely.